God has specifically chosen you to be here at this time and in this place. You have incredible potential, purpose, and calling to push back the darkness and be a light for Christ. Stand for nothing and you'll fall for anything. It's time to stand your ground. This is Unapologetic. Hey everyone, welcome to Unapologetic. I am so thrilled to have Jordan Lee Dooley with us today. I have admired her for years. She has wonderful work, just great books, great testimony, great show, and I know that you're going to benefit so much from what she has to say today. We're talking about really how to handle when we're disappointed, when things don't turn out how we want them to, the waiting season, and where God is in all of it. So please help me welcome to the show, Jordan Lee Dooley. Hi, Jordan.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm so honored to be here. What an intro.
I'm so excited to have you. Okay, so we're going to start out asking what we ask everyone. What do you wish Christians would stop apologizing for?
It's a good question. I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is I wish Christians, especially Christian women, but Christians in general, would stop apologizing for experiencing success in their life, in their careers. I think we get the idea of humility wrong and in fact start to practice a false humility by like downplaying what God is doing in our life or what talents he's given us or what we've been able to do in our life because of him. And so I think we need to stop apologizing for the successes that we do experience.
Okay, we just got to break that down because people aren't probably walking around like, I'm sorry that
Mhm.
I wrote a book.
Mhm.
But how practically do you see that people apologize for
Yeah, I
things that
think
God
and it
does?
may not even necessarily be an outward "I'm sorry." It's more
Right.
of a discomfort. It's
Mm,
um, a lack of confidence in that. It's a downplaying to maybe
mhm.
not make other people uncomfortable. It's a people
Mhm.
pleasing. Like we apologize not just with our words, but I think with our actions and the way that we show up to do things. And so I think
Hmm.
just like this false, I think a lot of broken mindsets around money. I think a lot of broken mindsets around just work in general
Hmm.
lead to this kind of response that's kind of like timid or even shameful. Like, oh, I don't want
Yeah.
people to know that make X, Y, and Z in terms of my income or something like that. And it's like, I think, we have such an opportunity to build the kingdom. And it's not that you should go around gloating about it. I think that's the
Mhm.
opposite end of the spectrum. But I think there's that middle ground where it's like you can like there's that quote that says humility isn't thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of
Right.
yourself less, right? So it's
Yeah.
not just about being like, look guys, look how great I am, but it's also I think a problem when we try to like when someone says hey, congrats on your promotion, oh yeah, it's and we just act
Mhm.
uncomfortable with that. I think that's kind of a
Mhm.
way of feeling like we aren't embracing the gifts God's given us.
Yeah. And I think probably because we've just been taught as Christians, of course, that everything we have is because of God, which is
Right,
true.
it's true.
I remember I wasn't going to share this, but when it was the last episode we were on with the TLC show, and they kept trying to say, like, aren't you so proud of yourself? And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
no, like, this could have gone either way. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's all God.
Mm-hmm.
But it really bothered them that, like, there was no
Mm-hmm.
way that we were going to say anything
Mm-hmm.
basically good about what we had done. And I've
Yeah.
thought about that conversation a lot, but
Mm-hmm.
we want to give honor to God, but also
Mm-hmm.
we don't have to be embarrassed of whatever
Right.
doors
Right.
He's opened
And
for us.
I think that's the thing. I think it's not even that you have to go around gloating like I'm so proud of myself. Look what I've done. Because I think that
Hmm.
is the opposite end of the spectrum that can
Yeah.
really warp what we have.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I think we get to boast in Christ as our strength, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I think the lack of confidence or the like downplaying what God is doing, and not just
Hmm.
making the most of it and embracing it and taking it for what it is and doing good things with it. I
Hmm.
think that's where we kind of get tripped up sometimes. And I just see that a lot with like
Yeah.
I coach a lot of women who are starting businesses and building businesses, and a
Hmm.
lot of them are Christians. And even the apology sometimes comes in the form of, I feel weird charging people, right? Like, or like there's a guilt
Hmm.
with that. And it's like, you're providing value, right? So it's just a
Hmm.
lot of mindset. It's like, God gave you the gifts, you're providing value. All businesses is a value exchange, right? So it's just
Yeah.
working through, I think, some of that like embarrassment or weird sense of guilt. It's like,
Right.
if you're doing it in integrity, you shouldn't feel that way.
Yeah, we need to get into all that. There's a million things that I want to talk to Jordan about, but can you just share your story? I'm familiar, of course, with it, but can you share your story for our listeners, just your testimony and where you are today?
Yeah, so the Spark Notes version of my story is I grew up in a Catholic Christian home, but really made my faith my own in college after kind of dabbling in other lifestyles and finding that that wasn't really what was right for me.
Yeah.
And so I really, about halfway through college, is when I gave my life to the Lord. And it's been a journey ever since then. I got married shortly after college and started a business at my senior year of college. So I've really been like a business owner, a creator, and a wife for the last 7 years, I would say,
Yeah.
which sounds really old. 6, 7 years since I've graduated college. That seems like a long time now. All of a sudden, it just flies. But anyways, started a small business as an Etsy store that was called Soul Scripts, and that really took
Mhm.
off when we created a sweatshirt line that had a phrase on it that said "Your brokenness is welcome here," and we can get into that if you want. But that was kind of what sparked a lot of my growth in the online space, and then I wrote a couple of books, not just casually. I self-published first because I got
Yeah.
rejected from every publishing house, and then had an opportunity to write a book. So in 2019, I published my first book, Own Your Everyday. And then in 2022, just in the last several months, published my second book, Embrace Your Almost. So that's kind of been a little bit of my journey. And then my second book was really, which I think I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit about today, but
Yeah.
that was really, it kind of embodies a big turning point because the first few years of my career, I felt like I experienced a lot of success really young. By the time I was 25, I had hit 7 figures in my business. I had built an online following, like hit success 30 under 30 list, like all these glamorous things, written a best-selling book. I mean, who does that, right? Like I was just like, wow, like this is the life. I had bought a home, I was married, like I was just checking all the boxes in
Mhm.
terms of like all the things I wanted, and it was happening
Yeah.
really early. And then when I was
Mhm.
25, I had multiple back-to-back miscarriages that just like totally flipped my world upside down, and some of them
Mm.
were really traumatic. And so it was this experience that totally shifted this idea that like if you just do the right thing, if you just
Mhm.
work hard, you'll get what you want, right? And I think I
Mm.
had subconsciously started to believe that because from a very young age, I put the work in, my business started to succeed. I, tried to do the right thing, I had a happy marriage. Like,
Mhm.
and so for the first time in my life, it kind of struck me like you can do all the right things and things can still go wrong. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of been what I've been working through and talking on quite a bit in the last couple of years, just learning like how do
Mhm.
you sit with the tension of both possibility and disappointment at the same time. And that's
Yeah.
really influenced how I work, my work style, the message I
Mhm.
care about sharing with women. I got really
Mhm.
into the just achievement of anything
Mhm.
for a while there. And I
Mhm.
think being laid flat on your back and having like your like losing children quite literally
Yeah.
and really traumatic experiences in life truly shift your perspective on what really matters, what you're
Mhm.
actually after, what really counts in life. And so
Mhm.
that kind of started to shift the way that I work, the things that I'm pursuing, and all that I'm doing.
Wow. Okay, so so much to talk about
I'm
there.
like, where do
But
you want to start?
okay, first part. Well, I just want to say first of all, like maybe if people aren't familiar with you, that's first how I connected with your story
Mhm,
was because I saw someone that was really unapologetic about
mhm,
the fact that they were a speaker and an author and they were a Christian and this is who you are and you
mhm,
can kind of leave it or take it. And so I was
mhm,
very drawn to that and
mhm,
everything you talked about, and you've always been very authentic. And
mhm.
of course,
Yeah,
with your
totally.
your brokenness is welcome here, which was,
Mhm,
I mean, of course, people that resonates with so many people. They think they're not
mhm,
welcome in the
mhm,
church and their friend
mhm,
group and families, and I think that that's, I mean, it just speaks for itself. I do want to ask you about that, but I
mhm,
do just want to say, of course. Thank you for your transparency
mhm,
and talking about the miscarriages. Like you and
mhm,
I both know how many people struggle with that and the
mhm,
strain it is on a marriage. And so
mhm,
it's interesting that you've chosen to talk about it because really it hasn't been wrapped up in a nice bow yet at this
mhm,
point. And so
mhm.
you're still in that middle season and
Yeah,
haven't seen really the other side yet. And
yeah,
so I think that that's something that's really interesting. Of course, when I've talked about it, we've talked about the miscarriages and then God giving us the triplets. And I mean, you're still in that middle
mhm,
place. So can you
mhm.
just talk about that? How is that to trust God? What does that practically look like in marriage and just
Yeah,
all the things?
it's a good question. And it's interesting because I wrote the entire second book that I mentioned, Embrace Your Almost, from the middle. And at first, I didn't
Mhm.
really like that. I was like, I thought by the time I turned this in or something, like something would have changed.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting because I think that was really intentional on God's part. Like, a lot of us want to have the storybook that we literally read,
Mhm.
like the book tied up with a
Mhm.
happy ending. And it kind of ended with
Yeah.
like, still in it with you. And I think that's so much more relatable. Like so
Yeah.
often we hear someone's stories when they've gotten to the other side of the mountain, and it can be
Mhm.
really hard when we're like, well, what if I never get to the other side of the mountain?
Yeah.
Like what if my story doesn't pan out the way I want? Like I love that other
Mhm.
people have gotten their happily ever after, but I'm in the middle right now. And I
Yeah.
need to know other people are with me, you know? So anyways,
Mhm.
it was kind of an interesting experience, but I feel like if I've learned anything in the last, couple years of this journey and seeking answers and all that we've been through about trusting God specifically, I feel like if anything, there's been a season where I've really wrestled with like, what's the point of prayer? Because
Wow.
the question that comes up is like, well, my prayers don't really change the outcome. And I think sometimes we as Christians get under this illusion that like if we just have enough faith, if we just believe big enough, God will like do what we want him to do, or we'll get the healing, or we'll get the outcome, or that our children will survive, or whatever it might be.
Hmm.
And sometimes God's answer is still no. And it seems
Yeah.
really cruel, right? And it's like, well, then why would I ask
Mm.
you, right? You start to feel when it starts to happen
Mm.
over and over and over, and you just keep
Mhm.
getting no's, and not even no's, even it sometimes feels worse than a no. It feels like, I'm going to give it to you and then I'm going to take it away, right? That's kind of
Yeah.
how it has felt. And I've walked through a season of really wondering, like, well, why would I ask you then? Like, you're going to do what you want to do. So
Mm.
why would I ask? And I think that's a really
Mm.
honest assessment when you find yourself feeling like you're being teased with something, or it's kind of a yes,
Yeah.
but then a no,
Mm.
especially in something like pregnancy loss. And so that's been a big question that I've wrestled with. And I don't feel like I've had this like, and here's the answer. Right? I could give you the cliche answer. I could tell you, well, we pray because prayer changes us. And that's like the Christian answer. That's logically and like biblically the right
Mhm.
answer. But as a
Mhm.
believer, it can be hard to get your heart and head on the same page sometimes. So you can
Mhm.
know that that's the answer and have a hard time believing and like making sense of that when it's your
Yeah.
life. And so that's something I've been wrestling through and working through. But I think in that process, the lesson that has come out of that is maybe the invitation to trust God is not to trust him for outcomes, but to just trust him regardless of the outcome. And I think that's the
Yeah.
hardest thing, especially
Mhm.
I think in the Western world, because we're trained. Like you pray for your children to be healthy, or for the job
Mhm.
promotion, or for the healing. And not that there's anything wrong with praying for those
Yeah.
things. Like I do think there is value in asking our Father for good gifts, right? But when
Yeah.
the answer is no, or when it gets taken away in a really painful way, it really starts to make you wonder, like, am I just trusting God for the gift, for the outcome, for the thing I think
Mhm.
I deserve or want or should have? Or am I just trusting that God knows best, even though it seems like he's really messing with me right now? So
Yeah.
hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, I feel like I've really had to release this idea that, like, if I just pray a certain prayer or enough
Mhm.
times or show up to prayer journaling, I'll get what I want. And I've had to release that and
Right.
be like, that's not how this works?
Right. Yeah, we had like a lot of different situations like that because like our thing started with we felt impressed to pray, like it's
Mm,
pray big things. And
mhm,
so we made a list of 20 things we felt like God put on our
mm,
hearts. We didn't
mhm,
tell anybody. It was
mhm,
just us, just Ryan and me.
mhm,
And then like they get pregnant and then lose the baby and they get
mhm.
pregnant, lose the baby. And I remember like I mean, the listeners have heard me say this. I felt like almost taunted,
Yeah,
like by Satan. Like
yeah,
I remember it was just like an onslaught, almost like I was
mhm.
being made fun of. Like I don't know how else to
Yeah.
explain it.
Yeah,
And
it's
like
like your prayers are being mocked is kind
yeah,
of what it
yeah,
feels
like
like.
it really felt like a mocking situation. And I
Mhm,
closed the door to my office and I stood up. I don't know who I was talking to. And I said, I am not going anywhere. And I know God hasn't forgotten me. So you better bring it. And
hmm,
like, I just like, but
hmm,
we made the decision. We're like,
mhm,
maybe we're never having kids, but
mhm,
that doesn't change the fact like we're going to decide now that we're
mhm,
not gonna let go of our faith. Like, of
mhm.
course, you have to actually like wrestle with,
Right,
well, what
right.
about with the loss and all
Yep,
of that.
yep.
And I think it's interesting. I wasn't until I wrote a book on prayer, I wasn't necessarily aware, I don't know how since I grew up in church, but
Mhm,
that there are cases in the Bible where prayer changed God's mind. Like
mhm,
those are like
mhm,
little known
mhm,
stories, but that,
mhm,
our prayers, it's a mystery, but
mhm.
somehow it can influence the outcome.
Yeah, and,
So I,
I think in that wrestling, I've had to go back to times where I have prayed, and I feel like the Lord has been faithful, and because
yeah,
what's difficult, it's like He's always faithful, but there are absolutely seasons where you feel like, where what?
yeah,
Like, it doesn't seem like he's being faithful, so it just
right.
feels like a wasted breath, right? And so,
Yeah.
I also think that that has deepened my prayer life, and it's also made me think a little bit more about how I pray, because I think before I did a
Mhm.
lot of just like my husband and I were talking about this. He goes, I said, I feel like it's not that we shouldn't pray and ask. And we've prayed bold prayers. Like, I mean, we will continue
Mhm.
to do that. But I
Mhm.
think we came to this realization of, man, most of the time we're praying by asking for something, asking for a blessing,
Yeah.
asking for a healing, asking for whether it's with
Mhm.
children or something else. And we were talking about it the other day even, and he was like, it's also like the purpose of prayer isn't just to like pray, change God's mind and get what you want. It's also to have a
Mhm.
relationship. It's like talking to God. He's like, if I only
Mhm.
came to you when I wanted you to do something, would you feel like we have a very healthy relationship? So that
Yeah.
has really been like at least my takeaway from the like, what's the point of prayer question. It's not that I feel like I
Mhm.
have it all figured out, but
Yeah.
leaning into like the intimacy and like the invitation for a relationship
Yeah.
more than just the asking for something.
Yeah.
um I think broadens, and then when you don't get the thing you're asking for, it really invites you to pray bigger and to pray differently
Yeah.
and to think like, am I just coming to you when I want something, or am I trying to build a relationship with you?
Mhm. Yeah, that's so good. So, what I want to talk about this because you're very good at goal setting, and that's kind of confusing if things aren't going according to plan.
Yeah.
So, can you just kind of talk with us? One, like we've been in student ministry for 13 years now, we work mainly with college and singles. Some people, it's not even on their radar to be setting any kind of goals and
Mhm.
almost just take the opinion of, well, God's going to do whatever He wants anyway. So, why
Mhm.
do I need to set goals? Why do I need to
Mhm.
pray for certain things?
Mhm.
If it's all just gonna happen. So
Mhm.
can you kind of tackle that? Like why set goals and then how can we?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the tension, huh? Especially when you feel like, well, life's just happening even when I try my darndest, right? But I still think there is value, like you said, in prayer and in like I don't know if the right word is like planning, but planning or like having some sort of aim in life, because also it's kind of, again, I think we just tend to operate in extremes. It's either I'm not going to have any goals or I'm going to be like, you idolize your goals, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there's a middle ground where it's like, I'm going to have an aim in life or an aim in the next season so that I have some direction, but I'm going to keep my hands open to if God shifts me or moves me or asks me to take a different path. So I think it
Mhm.
can be both. But at least in my life, I feel like, especially before this season of loss that I walked through, it was just really interesting because I feel like I was just kind of idolizing the goal, idolizing the
Mhm.
next level, idolizing the next achievement. And I didn't think I was doing that because I was doing a lot of it from a faith-based perspective. A lot of it was
Yeah.
for God, right? And you can
Mhm.
still get caught up in all of that. And so anyway, I think through the season of loss and just a lot of things that shift your perspective when you come face to face with life and death or something really hard in your life, it shifted my perspective on goals and how to go about them. So the way that I've gone about them now is I started by asking the question, okay, how can I think a little bit more big picture without necessarily trying to figure out my whole life, right? So I
Mhm.
will go sometimes when I'm trying to set a new goal or think about the future, I'll now ask the question, where would I like to be in 5 years? Now, that's where I would like to be. I may not get control over whether or not it all works out that way, but just to have a
Can't you
picture of
just
like,
like manifest it?
yeah, yeah, right. But just
Just make
asking
it happen.
like, what would I like? And it's more so like, what would I like my days to look like? How do I want to spend my time? Not so
Mhm.
much like, do I want to be a billionaire on the beach, right? It's more like, what do I want to feel like? How do I want to be spending my
Mhm.
time? What impact do I want to be making? Those kind of things. And I think
Mhm.
you can do that very prayerfully too. That's a big part of it. So that's the
Mhm.
first question. And then the second question has to be, and I think this is what we miss so much when setting goals. The second question has to be, why? Why is that where I think I should go or what I want to
Mhm.
aim for or what I'm working toward? Because then you can start
Mhm.
setting more specific goals, right? Once you kind of have a picture of, okay,
Mhm.
I'd like to maybe own a home in the next 5 years. I'd like to spend my days, be making an impact in this area of life, whatever.
Mhm.
Once you kind of have just some general clarity on that, then you
Yeah.
ask the question, why? And then
Mhm.
if your answer is like, well, because that's what my friend is doing and I really like her life, or because I see a lot of people on social media doing that, like I think we just
Mhm.
arbitrarily want things in life without
Mhm.
actually considering what's right for me. What does God have for
Hmm.
me? What matters? What's actually like
Interesting.
what has eternal value,
Yeah.
So I think asking that why question can be kind of scary because we might find that we don't actually have a good why or we don't have a reason
Hmm.
at all. It just sounds like a good answer. I think we do a lot of
Hmm.
things because they sound good. And my whole pushback to that, I think, especially through the season that shifted my perspective on a lot of things, is why. I remember I
Yeah.
was setting goals. I was setting some financial goals in my business with my husband. I think it was after our first loss. And so that was starting to kind of shift my perspective on just how I wanted to work. And
Mhm.
he pointed to a project. He said, "What do you want to make on this project?" And I threw out some
Mhm.
like big number that sounded good. And he goes, "Okay, awesome. Why?" And he wasn't even
Mhm.
saying that in like a mocking way. He was just
Mhm.
genuinely curious, like, why is that your goal? And I was
Mhm.
like, I don't know, it sounds good, you know? So anyways, that really, he goes, okay, well, let's like, let's break down what we actually need. Like, what do we actually
Mhm.
need to move the needle a little bit in the direction you want to go? Because what I was really trying
Mhm.
to do, the reason I thought I needed to make a cajillion dollars essentially was because I wanted to hire a team member to have some help to get out of the weeds, like to just basically get
Mhm.
closer to a life that is more conducive to parenthood whenever that would
Mhm.
happen, right? So we
Mhm.
got to the root of like why I really want to do the thing I think I want to do, but we
Yeah.
found out once we actually worked through it that like, oh, you only need to make like half of that in order to do, you know? So
Mhm.
anyways, my point is I think sometimes we just set arbitrary goals because we see someone else doing something because it looks good,
Mhm.
whatever.
Mhm.
So my encouragement is consider like what really matters to you.
Mhm.
And what do you feel like you want to do or that God is calling you to do? And then
Mhm.
why do you feel like that's something you want to work toward? Then you can set a specific, measurable, time-bound goal,
Yeah.
right? Then you can say, okay, in the next 6 months, I want to move this much closer to my goal. I want to have
Yeah.
$10,000 saved for a house, or I want to, whatever it may be. But I think you
Mhm.
have to start with what do I value and why do
Yeah.
I value that?
And it's interesting you talk about like we probably just want things we see. I mean, we're
Hmm.
almost constantly on
Yeah.
social. So I know like the biggest breakthroughs for me, like when I figured out, oh, like this is what I want to change, it's when
Hmm.
I've taken a social media break,
Yeah.
like some kind of fast, just did not look at all this input. And,
Hmm.
before social media, we used to talk about taking breaks from TV or secular music just so that
Yep.
you only had Christian things
Hmm.
influencing you and those ideas in your head for a certain amount of time. So I
Hmm.
think too, just getting away, whatever that means to
Yep.
provide, so God can speak to you.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I
Okay.
do think there's a lot of distractions telling us what we
Yeah.
should want. I mean, we live in a world that's constantly
Right.
saying you should want it all, right? And you can
Yeah.
have it all. And so, of
Mm.
course, that's confusing. And we either feel like, well, we're super overwhelmed by that. So I just not even going to do anything. Or we try
Mhm.
to do all the things. And it's like we get so distracted from like
Yeah.
what's actually right for us. What does God
Mhm.
have for us in this season? And what do we need to value and lean in on in this season of our
Mhm.
life? And that could shift. Maybe we'll need to focus
Mhm.
more on our careers in the future or more on our family. But life comes in phases, and I think we just get so distracted thinking we should do everything all at the same time that we miss out on
Yeah.
like the gems of what God has in this
Yeah.
season.
I really want to commend you for that because, like, when I was in that season, like, I knew that God told me, like, I mean, I had a very specific point where I was like, maybe this isn't going to happen. I still
Mhm.
have a ministry. Like, I still have
Mhm.
a purpose on
Mhm.
earth. Like, what do you
Mhm.
want me to do at this time? And I've
Mhm.
seen you do that. You're like,
Mhm.
okay, like, we don't have a child right now on earth.
Mhm.
So, I mean, you didn't just stop. You didn't
Mhm.
just close up shop. You didn't stop writing. Like,
Mhm.
you
There
kept
were moments I
fulfilling.
thought about it though.
Well, right, right. But I think what I'm getting to, because I've counseled a lot of girls or women that have gone through miscarriages and
Mhm.
infertility, they kind of get stuck.
Mhm.
They're like, this hasn't happened.
Mhm.
And
When you
they're, I
feel
mean,
like
really, they're kind of stuck.
yeah.
Just, maybe even, I hate to say, but like idolizing, well,
Mhm.
when I have kids, then I'll, start life back
Yeah.
up again. How
Well,
do
I
you
think
think
that's the case.
people, yeah.
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, I mean, what advice do you have for people that are in that middle
Yeah.
season? How can they find the purpose there?
Yeah, I think regardless of, for some women it is having children. For other women, it's finally feeling like they're doing something that they're good at, right?
Mhm.
For others, it's getting married. Like there's so many different things
Mhm.
that we're waiting on. But I think so often when there's something that feels outstanding in our life, and I don't mean outstanding like excellent, I mean like it's out of place. It hasn't
Yeah.
happened, right? Um,
Mhm.
I think, like what you said, you do kind of get stuck because it feels like your life, at least in this area, is just kind of like spinning in circles. It feels like your life is
Mhm.
the loading sign on the computer, the
Mm.
little like wheel that just
Mm, yeah.
spins because you think like, well, I'm ready. I should be moving on to the next thing. I should be enjoying this and I'm feeling like I'm not moving. And so I
Yeah.
think what we do is we tend to put our life on pause without even realizing we're doing that because we start to
Hmm.
say, well, I'll take the trip when I have a partner to go with me and see Europe with me, or I'll start the
Mhm.
ministry when I have a family or when I have more experience or when I have, and I
Mhm.
think we essentially like I wrote something one day and I guess my advice if I wanted to like boil it down, it's like don't let a waiting season turn into a wasted season.
Yeah.
Because I think when you start to put your life on pause until you get everything you think you should have, you're never going to go anywhere because the second you get the next thing, whether it's the husband, the kid, the house, whatever, there's always going to be a next thing. There's
Yeah.
always a, well, now I want the 4-bedroom house. Well, now I want another baby. Well, now I want,
Yeah.
a family or whatever it might be. And so
Mhm.
if you put your life on pause, waiting to get whatever it is that you think you want, you're never really going to
Mhm.
step fully into your God given potential. And the season you think is like your purpose, whether that's to be a wife or a mom
Mhm.
or an entrepreneur or anything else, like
Mhm.
your purpose can't be defined by that. Like if it's
Yeah.
meant for you, it's not going to pass you by. And I constantly have had to remind myself of that in the season that
Yeah.
I walked through, just because it's so, easy to start feeling like, well, I must be forgotten, or there's like, I'm
Yeah.
not working right, or something's wrong with
Right.
me. But yeah, I guess my best piece of advice is like, don't let a waiting season turn into a wasted season. And don't let the
Yeah.
thing that you're waiting on, whether it is a husband or a child or a career or
Mhm.
an opportunity or an open door or something else, don't let that like find you waiting. Like if it does ever
Yeah.
come and if it finally comes, I really just want to encourage you, like, let it come to you when you're really fully living and when you're
Yeah.
fully like embracing what God has put in
Mhm.
front of you and given you to do.
And I'm sure you would attest to this, but I mean, those seasons for me, like I would ask God, and He doesn't want us wondering. Like He
Hmm.
has a very specific plan for us. And I
Hmm.
think that really, whenever we're heartbroken and in those in between seasons, I don't know, for me, I've heard God so much more clearly. And He's always faithful to give answers about what we should be doing and how
Hmm.
how to spend our time.
Hmm.
I do want to ask you this because I
Hmm.
know we're the same in this way. We both got married young. They were
Hmm.
totally switching gears here.
Okay.
But a lot of young women, I know that you minister to a lot of young women. I mean, that's just not what's going on right now. A lot of
Hmm.
people are not getting married. They don't really see the value in marriage. And it's
Hmm.
just not, even if you look at the like romantic movies,
Hmm.
it used to be, and then they got married. And
Hmm.
I mean, that's not even really the
Hmm.
end of a lot of movies right now. And so I
Hmm.
know you're a proponent for marriage and
Hmm.
getting married young if you can, but can you
Hmm.
just kind of give a glimpse of why that is a good thing? And if you're
Yeah.
able to do that, hopefully,
Yeah, totally. I
hopefully
mean, I think
pursue
also it's
it.
so interesting because going back to even what I said about the extremes, like I feel like sometimes in Christian circles, marriage can get idolized and someone feels like there's
Mm-hmm.
something wrong with them if they're not married by 25. And at the same time,
Mm.
the world is constantly saying like, live your life, don't get tied down. Marriage is
Yeah.
like it's so devalued. So I think the
Right.
best thought I have on that is like if you have the opportunity to get married young, like it's not something that holds you back. It's
No.
not like settling down and getting married. Like that is all that is giving you is an additional partner. Like you can do so much more when there's two of you, when you have a
Right.
team. And that's not to say you can't do amazing things on your own either if the Lord has you in a single season. But I think
Mm-hmm.
it's important to remember like there's a gift. I mean, I feel
Yeah.
like my husband and I are in our late 20s now, got married at 22. And I'm so thankful, especially after going through loss. Like I'm thankful that we've had, like, it doesn't feel like, oh my gosh, we're running out of time. It's like we had the time to,
Yeah.
like, you don't know how your family journey is going to be. So if you found out
Mm-hmm.
somebody who you feel like is aligned spiritually, respects you, is it like they don't have to be like Prince Charming, but if it's a good fit for you, like don't overlook the value of commitment because you have no
Right.
idea how your life's going to unfold, and there is a gift in growing up together. I really feel like we went
Yeah.
from two broke college kids getting married to all sorts of career changes and navigating loss and grief and
Yeah.
all of that by the time we're 28 years old. I'm like, we've
Mm-hmm.
experienced so much in 5 or 6 years together that we never would have had we lived separate
Right.
lives and then had to try to figure out how to like join two adult lives. Like we had our
Mm-hmm.
first apartments together and our first homes and all of those things. And so, I don't think there's a better or worse way, but there are gifts in the
Right.
ability to lean into commitment when you're young,
Mm.
if you're able to.
That's so good. Yeah, we got married when we were 21, so
Okay.
same thing. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
And we didn't have a house, but we had
Hmm.
a really small apartment, and those are some
Hmm.
of the best memories were
Yep.
in that
Yep.
little one-bedroom apartment for sure. Okay, so we're coming to a close. Can you just tell us how can we embrace, using the title of your book, how
Mhm.
can we embrace our almost, those almost goals, almost dreams?
Yeah, if you feel like you just keep falling just a little short or you make progress and still don't feel like you're getting where you want to be, I think my best piece of advice for you is allow yourself to pause and remind yourself that it's okay to grow slow. And just
Yeah,
because your story might look different from someone else doesn't mean that it can't be just as good. And I
so
constantly have to
good.
remind myself of that. So I think that's important to hold on to. And I think the last thing I would say on that is don't be afraid to pause and really consider, like, is the direction I'm going, is the thing I'm really aiming for, is that actually something I value? Is that
Mm.
important to me? Or am I just thinking I need to hustle and work toward that or do that because it's been ingrained in me that that's what I should want? That's what I should
Yeah.
do. That's just the thing I should do next. Maybe a promotion is not the right next step in life for you, or
Yeah.
maybe getting married actually isn't the right next step, and maybe God needs to do a little bit in your life before it's time for that. So
Mm.
just lean into like asking yourself, is this actually something I value? Is this actually the right thing for me in this season, or am I just feeling the pressure because I see other people doing it, or I've been told I
Yeah.
should want it, or it just seems like the next thing? So
Mm.
that's the best advice I can have or I can give. And what else did you ask? Where to find me?
I was about to, but you
Okay,
can
I
just
thought you
go
asked
right
something about if
in.
you can find
Yeah,
me. Okay,
y'all.
I was like,
Jordan has amazing content. She's so encouraging. I mean, she has been such an encouragement to me, and I just want you to hear how you can connect with her.
yeah, well, jump the gun on that, but I thought you asked that, so my brain must have short circuited. You can find me anywhere on social media, Jordan Lee Dooley on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all the places. And then you can grab my books Own Your Everyday and Embrace Your Almost anywhere books are sold.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on, Jordan. This is a great, super helpful talk.
Thank you for having me. It was so fun to chat with you.
Thanks for tuning in to Unapologetic. Remember that you can hear today's episode and more at ptv.org/Julia.